Not all football boots are created equal. Some of them actually suck. And unfortunately, in the case of the Umbro Velocita, these boots suck. And that's unfortunate because these were a pair of boots I was actually really excited to try on. So in this video, we're going to be talking about where exactly Umbro went wrong. And at the end of the video, if you're interested in some better alternatives, I've linked some of my favorite boots in the description below. So to kick things off, let's talk about the design. And man, when it comes to the design, I almost don't even know where to start because when I first got these out of the box, I actually thought they looked pretty decent. I could tell immediately that they were going for a full one-piece upper with an elasticated collar, and I thought that the colorway looked pretty impressive. And on top of that, it also was a pretty unique sole plate that I hadn't quite seen from other brands before. But pretty much the moment I took these out of the box, that's when the problems started to appear. First off, the upper. It is so insanely rigid. And when you buy a relatively expensive pair of football boots being told that it's a full textile upper, you're going to expect some sort of flexibility and softness to it, but these boots bend almost like cardboard. And then the texture of the upper really isn't much better. To be honest, it kind of feels a little bit rough, almost like sandpaper. And it's that rigid upper that just drags the rest of the boot down, because while the elasticated collar that runs all the way through the midfoot under the lacing system here is a pretty good idea in theory, it just has such a tough transition period between that elasticated material and the textile upper here. It just doesn't do a really great job at connecting the two pieces of the material. The entire point of having an elasticated material running over the top of the foot here is to make the boots feel more comfortable and adjust to the shape of your feet. But when you have an upper that's this rigid, they're just going to be uncomfortable no matter what. To me, it almost seems like they set out with the goal of creating a boot that could compete with the likes of the Mercurial Vapor from Nike or maybe the Puma Future, but they just used the complete wrong choice of materials and the execution was just so flawed. And there's even more odd design choices that Umbro implements, like this layer of plastic right at the front of the toe box. Now this upper isn't flexible to begin with, but this added layer of plastic towards the toe box just makes that area that much more uncomfortable. I'm not sure if the goal here was to add durability, potentially add protection, or make the ball easier to toe poke, but either way, it just wasn't a great idea. Now flipping around to the back of the boot, looking at the sole plate, I would say this is probably the least offensive thing about this football boot because there's really not much that they could have done wrong here. They just have a simple combination of both conical and these triangular studs that are for use on firm ground surfaces. But after analyzing the sole plate a little bit further, I still think there are some pretty big design flaws here. So if you take about 90% of football boots, and just for an example, I have the Adidas Predator League, it's about an $80 football boot, and if you take it and you bend it right across the sole plate, you are usually going to have a little bit of bending mostly towards the midfoot or toe box area. So towards the front of the boot, that's where the sole plate is going to bend. And that makes sense because that's where your foot pronates or bends when you're running. Now, when you take the Umbros here and you bend the sole plate, immediately it bends at the heel. Look at that. So this is me just pulling from both ends of the boot, right? Twisting it. It is clearly weakest at the base of the heel here. And that's really odd because that's not where your foot pronates and bends when you're running. So it just adds to a slightly uncomfortable experience not having the sole plate flex in the position that it should be. So even though the stud configuration of the sole plate is pretty good, the overall tooling is not great. Literally, I think the only redeeming thing about the design of these boots is how they look, and even then, I don't think they look amazing, but there's definitely some uglier football boots out there. So moving on, let's talk about the fit. Now, it's no surprise, putting these on for the first time was not fun. The lockdown is just mid, it's really average, and even though you have this elasticated collar here, it just doesn't do a great job of staying close to your ankle, and even with the addition of this lacing system, even if you have the final lace holes tied pretty tightly across your ankle, you are still going to get a little bit of slipping across your heel. Then in terms of how my feet actually felt when they were inside the upper, it just kind of feels like a prison. The toe box in and of itself is narrow, and then the material of the upper isn't flexible enough to accommodate for that like it might be in some other football boots. And because the upper is so rigid, as I already mentioned, when you're walking or running, literally as your foot bends, the upper will just dig into the top of your feet. And because of the lack of lockdown that I mentioned earlier, these boots never really feel that secure on your feet. So with all of those flaws in mind, let's talk about what these boots were actually like to play in. And this should also come as no surprise, but these boots were not very fun to play in. And that's because the only thing I could think about while I was wearing and running around in these boots was how uncomfortable they were. I literally could only play for about 20 minutes before the top of my feet were getting sore from the upper digging into them, and I was starting to get some irritation around the heel area. I mean, can you kick a ball in them? Yes. Do they have a decent amount of sensitivity because the upper's quite thin? Yes. But I can guarantee you that for most people, after playing for close to an hour in these boots, they're just not going to be giving you a great experience. And possibly the most shocking thing about these football boots is that they retail full price for close to $275. That is absolutely insane. I mean, on the same day I was playing with these, I got to try on the Predator Leagues from Adidas, which are a third takedown $80 pair of football boots, and these were so much more comfortable. And I'm not even saying that these boots are an extremely comfortable pair, but compared to these, it's not even close. And you know, I can excuse odd design choices here and there, but when it comes to fit, feel, and comfort, I definitely am expecting more from a boot that costs upwards of $200. So what competitors should you be looking at for the Umbro Velocita? Honestly, anything else. I can guarantee you that whatever features you're looking for, you can find them at a better value and a better quality in different boots. If you want something with a sock-like, elasticated knit upper, just go with the Puma Future. If you want a lightweight and aggressive speed boot, just check out the Vapor 15 from Nike or the X Crazy Fast from Adidas. And if you want modern boots with a slightly wider fit, I check out the Furon V7 Pro or the Tequila V4 Pro from New Balance. And as I mentioned already, even third tier takedown boots from Nike and Adidas are going to be a better bet than the Umbros here. Now, I'm generally an optimistic person, so I don't want to say that all hope is lost for Umbro and this model, but I definitely think that if you had some interest in this football boot, you should sit this one out and wait for the next variation to see if Umbro actually makes some improvements. Because until they do make some improvements, I can't recommend these boots. And that is going to do it for this video. I want to stay honest with all of the videos I create, and sometimes that is going to mean negative reviews. But who knows, maybe next year Umbro will come out with a new variation of these boots and they'll actually be a lot better. And if that is the case, I'll be the first to let you know. Either way, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.